Namita, we can start.
Okay, sir. The father of modern philosophy, René Descartes, once said, "It is not enough to have a good mind. The important thing is to use it well." A very warm good afternoon to one and all. I, Namita Nishan, on behalf of PG Department of Psychology, welcome you all to today's episode of our 5-day international e-workshop on the topic Research Methodology, Paradigm and Trends. Today, we will be focusing on the subject Consensual Qualitative Research Methodology. Before we begin, to keep away from technical inconvenience, my video will be kept switched off until the end of the event. Let me also share a few instructions to all the participants. To avoid any disruption during the session, please mute yourself unless asked to. If you have any queries, type them kindly into the chat box. These questions will be brought up during the question and answer session towards the end of the webinar. Prayer is the bridge between panic and peace. Let us invoke the blessings of the Almighty and be humble before His power. To lead us with the prayer, I invite Atulya S. Menon of 2nd BSc Psychology.
Chinmayarupa Chiranjeeva Snehaswarupa Jagadisha Jeevasandayava Namikkinnu Kanivodennum Anugrahikku Chinmayarupa Chiranjeeva Aayiram vasandangal virinyalam Aayiram mulavil thirinyalam Aayiram vasandangal virinyalam Aayiram mulavil thirinyalam Nidhana sundarame നിന്നൂടെ ശക്തിയെ വാഴ്ത്തുന്ന സർവവുമേ നിതാന്ത സൗന്ദര്യമേ നിന്നൂടെ ശക്തിയെ വാഴ്ത്തുന്ന സർവവുമേ ചിന്മയരൂപ ചിരഞ്ജീവാ
Thank you, Atulya. I humbly request Ms. Neeti Rose Anto, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology, Yuvakshetra Institute of Management Studies, to deliver the welcome speech. Ma'am.
Thank you, Benita. Good afternoon, one and all. Honorable Resource Person, Dr. Maribi, Balagan, Department Head for the Jimmy Faculty of PG Department of Psychology, Yuvakshetra Institute of Management Studies, Research Scholars, and my dear students. Today, we all have gathered here as a part of our 5-day international workshop series on research methodology, paradigms, and trends. I'm extremely privileged to have given the opportunity to extend the word of welcome. First and foremost, I would like to extend my warm welcome to our Honorable Resource Person, Dr. Maribi M.A. Benita Balagan, Admission Director and Faculty, Department of Psychology, Cagayan State University, Philippines. We are very honored to have you here, Madam. Family, I welcome you, ma'am, for this person of our department, head of the department. And I also welcome all my colleagues, research scholars, my students who have gathered here. Thank you, one and all. Enjoy the session and have a great session ahead. Thanks once again.
Thank you, ma'am. I am profusely overjoyed to take the opportunity to introduce our chief guest of the day, Dr. Maribi MA Benita Balagan from Philippines. She holds a doctoral degree in counseling psychology from De La Salle University, Manila, with a major in clinical counseling. She is a registered guidance counselor and also works as the on-call counseling psychologist at the Cagayan Institute of Behavioral Science. She has also published various articles with the help of significant publications. Her areas of expertise include topics like mental health, stress management, and psychology of disaster response, to name a few. Without much ado, let me welcome Dr. Maribi ma'am to take over the meet. Ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is really a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon. And before I start my lecture, I would like to thank Dr. Father Jimmy Akatu for inviting me to this conference. And so what I'm going to share with you are the rudiments of consensual qualitative research, not as an expert, but as a, should I say, as a practitioner who used the method when I was doing my dissertation. So, because I am not really an expert in the methodology, I would like to engage in a interesting or interactive discussion later on after I shall have presented my share my slides.
All the participants are kindly requested to mute their mic so that the presenter, our resource person, will be able to present it in a conducive atmosphere. Thank you.
Okay, so the consensual qualitative research method. Now, the objectives of my presentation would be to discuss the nature of CQR as a method of scientific inquiry, to explain its theoretical underpinnings, to discuss how the method is applied, and explain how the data is analyzed. I shall be identifying also its strengths and weaknesses. So what is CQR? CQR, or consensual qualitative research, is a systematic way of examining the representativeness of results across cases through the process of reaching consensus of multiple researchers. So I would like to emphasize here that in doing CQR, the researcher is not the only one involved, because the researcher would involve a team of researchers. That is why it is called consensual, because the team has to come up with a consensus in data analysis. So this method is not new. However, it is not as popular as the other qualitative research methods. It was developed in 1990 when authors Hill, Thompson, and Williams tried to analyze the data based on grounded theory, comprehensive process analysis, phenomenological approach, and feminist theory. Now, in other words, CQR is a qualitative research that aims to build theories, and it is different from quantitative research, which aims to test theories. Okay, so as a qualitative research method, Bogdan and Balagan describes how it is used. So according to Bogdan and Balagan, qualitative researchers generally seek data from natural settings and use themselves as the main instrument for analysis and for gaining insights into the data. They seek to describe phenomena rather than to manipulate phenomena. They examine the process of experience as well as the outcome. It is used, they use rather inductive analysis so that theories are built from the bottom up during the conclusions based on the data rather than specifying a hypothesis in advance and using the data to test the hypothesis. They are concerned also with meaning or understanding the phenomenon from the participants' perspective. Now, what are the philosophical underpinnings of CQR? Basically, CQR is constructivist and post-positivist. So, in constructivism, researchers acknowledge the existence of multiple equally valid constructed versions of the truth. Hence, researchers embrace the uniqueness of each participant's words and texts and also attend to the participants' context. Now, CQR is more inclined to be constructivist because basically each participant's experience is a socially constructed reality. And the researchers, when they reach common analysis of the data, is also another construction of reality. Now, researchers are constructivists in their acknowledgement of the mutual influence of the researcher and the participant. In CQR, the researcher learns the phenomenon from the participant and helps the participant explore the experience of the phenomenon more deeply. CQR also has a flair of post-positivism. Researchers who adopt the post-positivist perspective use multiple perspectives in the pursuit of a consensus among team members, working collaboratively to co-construct the best representation of the data. So, an analysis of a case will not stop with only one researcher. It involves the analysis and interpretation of the data by other researchers. Now, that's the beauty of CQR because it somehow eliminates what we call researcher bias. Now, the post-positivist component also lies in the use of standard, semi-structured protocol to obtain consistent information across participants, hence ensuring that the same set of functional questions are asked from the participants so that one rule of thumb in doing CQR is to create a homogeneous group of participants. That would be discussed in detail later. Okay, so these are the primary components. I'll just run through them and a clearer and a detailed discussion will be done as we go along. So in data gathering, this would involve the use of interviews, the use of open-ended questions, describing the words of interest by words and not by numbers, using a criterion-based sampling method so that there may be a small number of cases, but they are studied extensively. Now, understanding a specific part of the experience on the context of the whole experience. So, for instance, when you wanted to study experiences, the experience should be, human experience rather, should be described in relation to the context when it occurred. Okay, so culture, looking into cultural meanings of the experience may be considered in doing the analysis in CQR. So applying the inductive process with conclusion built from the data rather than imposing a theory and then a priori structure of the theory. So CQR does not aim to test a theory. It aims to explore human experience and come up with a theory that would describe the experience or the phenomenon. So another another component of CQR is that researchers usually organize a primary team of 3 to 5 co-researchers. It was mentioned at the outset, that this is the main element of CQR. The researcher does not analyze the data by himself or herself, but involves a team of co-researchers. Now, other than the team of co-researchers, the researcher also assigns 2 auditors. Okay, so that these auditors check the consensus judgment to ensure that the primary team does not overlook the important data. So the primary team continually goes back to the raw data to make sure that their results and conclusions are accurate and based on the data. Well, this is the taxing part of the method, when the team members will have to review the data until such time that they would come to a consensus and that they would come to a common decision and analysis of the raw data. Okay. Now, so in analyzing the data, these are some of the reminders. So responses to open and ended questions from the questionnaires or interviews for each individuals are divided into domains. I will show you some examples later on. Then it also involves the creation of core ideas, and it involves cross-analysis. So data analysis would involve 3 steps. First, each member of the team would do an individual case or individual interpretation of the data, so that each case is individually reviewed and interpreted by every member of the team. So we call this the within case analysis. Then core ideas and domains are identified, and then cross-analysis is done. When we do cross-analysis, the group of researchers, the team of researchers would get to meet again and analyze how they have done the within case analysis, and then they come up with a common domain, common core ideas, and common categories for all the participants of the study. Okay, so I think I mentioned that earlier, no? Now, the data is reviewed. I just would like to emphasize this, that the data is being reviewed by the auditor to minimize groupthink. This is also one of the most important elements of the consensual qualitative research, the role of the auditor. Okay, so these are the basic steps in doing CQR. First, I'll run through them, and then I'll discuss them in detail later. So we develop research questions, we choose and structure a team, we select a target population, recruit participants, design and pilot questionnaires and interview guides, collect the data, complete and check transcripts, and send transcript to participants for correction. Okay. So in developing a research topic, we have to bear in mind that a research topic is the basis for formulating the interview questions, so that the searchers need to select a topic they are interested in and passionate about. Now, just a word of reminder, embarking on a topic that is emotionally or politically loaded must be taken with caution. Okay. And being overly invested in the outcome of the results can make it also difficult for researchers to approach topics in an unbiased manner and listen openly to interviews' experiences. Okay, so what are these possible topics? This information was lifted from Hill and Snock's studies. They were published studies, and if we try to look at the research topics, they all dwell on human experience and psychotherapy. I would like to say also that CQR is a very good method in psychotherapy and counseling research. It's a very good method, I should say, in counseling and psychotherapy research. So these are some of the topics, although we can explore other topics. We can look into a lot of human experiences. Like, for example, today we can look into how people cope with the challenges of COVID-19. We can look into how vulnerable groups also cope. We can also look into the experiences. Using CQR, we can look into the experiences of medical frontliners during the surge or during this pandemic. So we have a lot of possible research topics to dwell on using the consensual qualitative research method. Okay, so how can we structure a team? What are the things to bear in mind when we choose a team of co-researchers or a team of, should I say, a research team, or a team of co-researchers? Okay, so who should compose your team, and what requisites do you have to consider? Okay, so let's look first into the roles of the co-researchers. First, the co-researchers need to get along. They have to respect each other and be able to resolve inherent power differences. They need to open to negotiating because CQR process requires listening to people. And the team members have to be flexible and resist the need for closure, so that the discussions and meetings that they would have will not end unless they really have to come up with a consensus and an analysis that is elegant enough to represent the data. Now, so it is important for team members also to have different, but not totally disparate theoretical perspectives. If orientations are too similar, team members might share what you call systematic bias and indicate that a construct is present even if there is no enough evidence for the assertion. Now, in contrast, if they are too far apart theoretically, team members might have difficulty finding a common language or even agreeing on basic constructs. So to make the data analysis go smoothly, it is important for the team members to know their roles. Hence, they will have to be oriented first, no, by the researcher. Okay. Now, the role of the auditor is also quite crucial in the consensual process because they primarily read through all the raw material or data strands in each domain and determine whether the raw material, I mean the data, is in the correct domain, whether all the core ideas are concise and reflective of the raw data, and they may also suggest changes in the titles of domains or recommend that domains be think about how they would do the coding and match their ideas with those of the primary team. Okay, so moving on. Now, how can we select a sample? Okay, in selecting a sample, the sample here refers to the participants. Who are the participants of our study? Okay. So, in selecting the participants, the researcher's role is to come up with a selection criteria. Okay. So, they have to the researcher must define the selection as clearly as possible. For example, I just would like to give my study as an example. When I did the study, my study was about the experiences of mothers with children diagnosed with ADHD. So the children had ages ranging from 7 years old to 11 years old, and they were really diagnosed by a developmental pediatrician. Okay, they had no, they were children who had no comorbidities or coexisting medical condition, and for the mothers, their age group, the age group of the mothers are from 25 to 40, and their child is their biological child, and the marital status did not matter anyway because life circumstances might be contributory to their experience. So I did not anymore include other criterion in choosing the participants of my study. So what I'm trying to say here is that the selection criteria must be very clear. Now, sampling should also be ideally random. Now, we select, while we have set the selection criteria, we do purposive sampling. The selection also of the participants randomly can be done when there, for instance, you have around 25 potential participants and 2 share almost the same circumstances and characteristics. So you'll have to do some kind of random selection. Okay, so the recency of experience is also an important factor to think about when selecting participants. Maybe try to avoid selecting a participant who had the experience many years ago. Chances are they might have already forgotten the experience. Okay, moving on. So the sample size and recruiting of participants. Now try to remember these principles. So usually the CQR researcher would select small number of participants. So usually the participants would range from 8 to 15. No? It's quite different from grounded theory, because in grounded theory, you can use about 25 to 30 participants. Somehow similar with phenomenological case study, which also allows about 10 participants. So in CQR, you can use a minimum of 8 participants and a maximum of 15. Now, in recruiting participants, it is always proper to send an initial letter and follow it up with a phone call. Now, give time for the participant to think about whether he or she will participate in the study or not. In developing a protocol, the role of the literature is also important. However, when we start to analyze the data, we must, should I say must, or somehow we should forget the literature, because the data might not fit into the literature. Remember that the main purpose of doing a qualitative research is to build theory and not to test theory. Okay, so it says there that forgetting the literature is done when it comes to analyzing the individual cases. Why? Because there might be new constructs that would emerge. And usually when you create the core ideas and the domains, try to use constructs that are not repetitively used in the literature. Okay, so the choice of questionnaire versus interview. Sometimes we, in developing the protocol, when you're about to gather your data, you are placed in a dilemma whether to choose a questionnaire or an interview. It would be easier to gather data using the questionnaire, but it would defeat the purpose of a qualitative research. So it is best to use the interview. Now, when do we use a questionnaire? Now, we use a questionnaire when we ask basic questions like, for example, how old are you? From what school did you graduate? Okay, so basic information. You can make use of questionnaire. The interview here means the semi-structured interview. So it is crafted in such a way that there are a set of questions which require the interviewer to probe and elicit rich information from the interviewee. Okay. So in designing the protocol, you'll have to bear this in mind. Develop a fairly detailed questionnaire or interview protocol based on the research questions. Okay. Then write the warm-up questions. Usually the warm-up questions here would refer to warm-up questions. How was your day? So it's like when you're starting to build, especially when you do an interview, when you're starting to build rapport and get into a more comfortable and work more comfort, when you get the interviewee into a more comfortable state, so you ask questions that would somehow make the interviewee comfortable. So like, how was your day? I'm going to ask you a few questions. Let's start with, okay, can you give me your complete name? Then how old are you? Um, okay, so like that, no? Okay, so then write the grantor question. Now I'd like to give as an example again, no, my experience, no, in my dissertation writing. So because the participants were mothers with ADHD kids. So the grantor question is like a general statement or a general question that would allow the interviewee to talk more about the experience. So for example, I asked them, I asked them, describe a typical day with your ADHD child. Okay, so they started to talk about it like, when I wake up in the morning, I cook breakfast for my kid, and he's supposed to get up early for school, but he would not want to get up early. He would want to toss in bed, and he would throw tantrums whenever I ask him to take his breakfast, etc. So she's every individual participant talk freely about how they are able to manage their child from the time the child wakes up until the child sleeps. Okay, then write open-ended questions. Okay, open-ended questions are not questions that would require the interviewee answers like yes or no, or definite answers, no? So open-ended questions would be like, can you talk more about it? Okay, so how was it? How did it affect you emotionally? Okay, would you like to talk more about the challenges that you have experienced in dealing with your ADHD child? What was the worst experience that you had? Oh, okay. So write open-ended questions. Okay. Now, recording, this is an important task in doing CQR, no? When you record, when team members and the researcher also records expectations and biases. Okay. Why is this important? Because by recording expectations and biases, the team members can become aware of themselves, and they try to set these biases aside during the coding process. So the co-researchers, the team of researchers should also be more aware of themselves, be more aware of their biases. So if they say, sometimes they would say, what is just like in my experience, I approached one faculty member who had some psychoeducational sessions, with teachers of special education under the special education program. Okay, so the teacher, that mother, had an ADHD child. Okay, so she was like hesitant to give her thoughts about how an ADHD child must be handled, and what are the causes. So she voluntarily withdrew from the group from the research team. Okay, Now, so that in starting the when you start the within case analysis and you come together and the research team, the members of the research team come together to analyze, across the cases, then they can talk first about their biases and expectations. The other team members can also help their co-team members to resolve their expectations and biases. They can come up with a journal, then talk about what they have written in the journal before they start the cross analysis. So that upon the completion of the study, team members can return to their expectations and biases and see whether they learned anything new in the study. This is one of the strengths of CQR. Okay. Now, in collecting the data, first in doing the interview, so prior to beginning the interview, interviewers need to obtain informed consent. So I think I mentioned that earlier. Now, clinical skills of knowing when to probe, how to support, and encourage the interviewee, and what boundaries to maintain in terms of intrusiveness are crucial. Okay. Now, building support into the interview, and interviewers need to obtain the appropriate recording equipment to record the interviews. Interviewer must take extensive notes. Now, I would like to emphasize, that the interviewer here is the researcher. So it is the researcher who does the interview. Now, transcribing the interview. So each interview needs to be transcribed verbatim, except for, of course, expressions uttered by the interviewee, or maybe you can strike that out from the transcribed, from the transcript, and you just mention the most important things that they said. Okay, so go through the transcribed sessions and delete proper names. This is very important. We must remember that the identity of the participant should always be held confidential. Okay, so you can make use of pseudonyms, remove titles or any descriptor that would identify the participant. Now, send copies of the transcribed session to the interviewees to see if they have any additions, corrections, or clarifications. Okay. So this is how tedious the method is. Okay. So here the diagram shows the process of within case analysis, developing domains, constructing ideas, and auditing domain and core ideas. So the process of within case analysis, it usually starts with developing code domains within cases and argue to consensus. Okay, construct core ideas within cases and argue to consensus. Auditor reviews domains and core ideas and revise domains and core ideas of each case. Okay, how are domains developed? So domains are used to group or cluster information or data about similar topics. Okay, so after transcribing the data, the transcribed data is given to the different team members. Okay, the researcher gives the transcribed sessions to the team members. And then the team members would identify what are the main topics in that emerge from the data. Okay, so they code the topics. They code the transcribed session. Okay, they do it individually, and then they come together and see whether they had common domains. Okay, so start with a list of domains that seem relevant based on a review of the literature and the interview protocol. And then remember that the domains change to fit the data set after the team works with the data until the team decides on the most elegant way to segment the data. Okay, the team codes the data and then they meet again after each member coded the data. Okay, so after developing the domains or the main ideas, the main themes, then the next step is to construct the core ideas. This process is called the obstructing process. And this is to capture the essence of what the interviewee said about the domain in fewer words and with more clarity. Okay. Now, so when obstructing, team members should try to keep the focus of the domain in mind. Okay. And then once the team members have developed the core ideas independently, they come together again as a team to discuss their ideas until a consensus is reached. Okay. Now, auditing domains and core ideas. The auditor determines whether the raw material is in the correct domain, whether all the important material in the domain has been abstracted, and the wording of the core idea is concise and reflective of the raw data. Now, I also would like to mention that in like interpreting, in analyzing the data or in transcribing, for instance, the verbatim responses of the participants, and you are to come up with the core ideas. One thing to remember is that try to avoid doing interpretation or try to avoid interpreting the verbatim responses. Try to stay close to the data. CQR is not interpretative phenomenological analysis. CQR is staying close to the data so that when the participant talk about maternal influence and you are to transcribe that, and when you are trying to abstract the core ideas, the maternal transference finger can be coded as the client was acting to the therapist like he was acting towards his mother. So you're not going to say there is maternal influence, maternal transference, but you're going to say the client was acting to the therapist like he was acting towards his mother. Okay. So the wording of the core idea is concise and reflective of the raw data. Okay. So now you may also suggest changes. The auditor rather may also suggest changes in the title of the domains or recommend that domains be divided or combined. Okay. Now, the most exciting part of the method is the cross-analysis. So you do the cross-analysis, then determine its representativeness to the sample, and then audit the cross-analysis. Okay. So this is the process of the cross case analysis. So the team members, again, develop categories within domains across cases, and then the auditor reviews the cross analysis, revise categories if necessary, add more cases if the auditor thinks that the data is not really stable. There is too much variation in the codings and the core ideas among the team members. Okay, so the auditor recommends to check the stability of the data, so that if it is not stable, they have to add more cases, and if it is stable, they can proceed to the next step. Okay, so if the data is stable, then the team examines patterns in the data, okay, and then divide sample into more homogeneous subgroups if appropriate, and then the auditor reviews some pathways in the data. So what does this event lead? Where does this event lead to? How did this event happen? Okay, so that in some post-study framework of CQR, the framework would show the psychological process that happened when in studying the psychological process of the experience, rather. Okay. Okay. So the researcher must keep memos about insights, chart the results, do a stability check, and do the narrative write-up. Okay, so here are the final steps of the CQR. Develop a narrative account across cases. Okay, so each case in writing the results of the study, the researcher should now come up with a narrative of each case. Okay, they describe the illustrative cases, write up and present the results, and the CQR researcher would always get feedback from participants and colleagues, rewrite the results, and publish if possible. Okay, here is an example of the within case analysis. Here you could see the responses of the participant. Okay, the researcher has described a typical day with your ADHD child. So the client number 1 said, "It is so difficult. I am really confused about disciplining him. Most of the time, it is his nanny who looks after him because I also have a 2-year-old child. In the morning, I prepare his breakfast and then I help him dress up. It's good he knows how to bathe and dress up himself." Okay, now how to code the responses. Okay, this is only one of the examples of the codings that the research team had, so that there's the domain, the target topic in question, daily, the daily experience. So it's the font is colored, is in yellow, and green, the positive aspect in the narrative. So the green, the green lettered font, the green font rather, is the category, and then the yellow is the domain. Okay, so the verbatim responses are coded that way. Okay. Now, this is another example. How did you notice that your son is different from other children of his age? These are the initial codes. Okay, then the interviewee said, at first I thought he was a normal child, but I thought to myself that he has behavioral problems because he was too motile. Sometimes he would growl and could not control himself. When he started to go to school, I became more worried because his teachers started to complain about his behavior. So this verbatim responses was coded, coded, no? Initially as behavior before diagnosis. So this is one of the main domains, one of the main topics, no, in the verbatim responses of the participants. Before diagnosis, this is what the participant experience. Okay. Okay. So this would show how the data set are classified, no? Classified under domains and the categories. Okay, so the challenges are the domains. So the child's characteristics were found to be the major challenge, no, in the experiences of the mother, and then the external circumstances. Under the categories, we have these ones here, hyperactivity. These are the child's characteristics that really that are really considered challenging to the mothers, their stubbornness. Okay, now the frequency here refers to the representativeness of the response across the samples or across the participants. So because there were 10 participants, 7 of them considered hyperactivity as the most challenging characteristic of the child. Okay, so that it is described to be typical. Okay, so the representativeness of the sample may be categorized into general if there are about 8 to 10 who answered under that category, and then 7 if it is 7 to 5 if it is typical, and below if it is if the number of participants gave that answer under the same category is 4 and below, then it is called a variant response. So that is how the representativeness of the sample is being classified. Okay. Now, this is the most challenging part of the method when you do the post-study framework. Now, the post-study framework represents the new constructs and the psychological process that emerge from the data. It is the researcher's contribution to the body of literature, and usually in the final results of the study, the researcher diagrams how the data unfolded that made it different from the pre-study framework. Okay, again, I would like to use as an example my study. So this was my pre-study framework. I conceptualized that having a child with ADHD is a very challenging experience, and it is problem-based. Meaning to say that the mother with an ADHD child would be always in a problematic situation. Okay, so their experience would be affected by how they appraise their child before and after diagnosis. Okay, they are stressed. They have having a child would impact their well-being negatively. However, they would be able to cope, and their coping strategies would also depend on their personal resource. Of course, the mother have their needs, and an intervention that would address the mother's challenges would be proposed. Okay. After gathering the data, this was my post-study framework. Notice that it is quite different from my pre-study framework. So we look the challenges of the mother prior to diagnosis. So are the child's characteristics and some external life circumstances. No? And the external life circumstances here refer to their financial condition. The more financially unstable the mother is, the more stressed she is. And in looking at the initial reaction, I also looked into the initial reaction. This came out from the data set that they had varied reactions after their child was diagnosed. Okay, so there are two processes that may happen when the mother gets to learn that her child is ADHD. It is diagnosed with ADHD. So the mother may either hope that her child will be treated. So if the mother is more hopeful about the treatment that the child could get, then she is likely to resort to adaptive coping, and it would impact her well-being positively, and there is an acceptance of the child. I'm sorry, there is a missing box there. Okay, then the other so that the experience can also be described this way. After getting the child diagnosed, the mother may engage in anxiety. The mother may experience anxiety. She may be uncertain about her child's condition, and she's likely to resort to maladaptive coping, and that will impact her well-being negatively. However, the mother learns to adapt and gradually accept the child's condition. Okay. So let me now go to the strengths and limitations of the method. The strengths would be, it is a useful method for examining any research question or which the researcher wants rich descriptive results. It is valuable for psychotherapy research because it allows the researcher to examine context, sequences of interactions of events occurring over a long period of time. And it is also the best method to look into inner experiences of participants. It is also useful for investigation of underserved populations that are wary for traditional research methods. Now, from the literature, it was also mentioned that those who did or used the research method said that CQR is fun and engaging because a harmonious relationship between the researcher and participant usually comes out or usually emerge, and it is a method that gives voice to participants, and we get closer to the data, and it allows researchers to understand complex phenomena. Okay, now its limitations: it is time consuming and costly. Problems on trustworthiness of the data may also arise, and problem on replication across samples may also happen. And the team and the auditing process may pose as a challenge to CQR researchers. Okay. Okay, I think that ends my presentation, and I would like to share here a link. You can enrich the information that you got from this lecture by watching a video. No, this is the link. It's also a short video of how CQR is done by the authors themselves. Clara, I think it's Clara Hill and Sandra Knox. Okay. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, ma'am. So moving on to the question and answer session. Questions raised in the chat box will be answered here. Ma'am, am I audible?
Yeah, you are very much audible, ma'am. And yeah, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to ma'am, the speaker ma'am. It was really very wonderful session. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It is also my pleasure to share my insights with you.
Ma'am, so one question is, could you please mention about the areas of the topic which could be explored by using CQR?
Okay. Now, I mentioned earlier that
counseling and psychotherapy
research, any topic under counseling and psychotherapy can be a very good potential research topic. It could be a very good topic for CQR. And so if we want to look into human experience, like unusual experience for instance, we want to understand some the influence of cultural meaning, understanding human experience in the context of culture, religion. These are for CQR. Any topic, or human experience.
Participants, please mute yourself.
Answer your question, ma'am.
Someone please mute.
Hello. Hello. Ma'am, my question is, can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, I can hear you, ma'am.
Okay. Ma'am, my question is, usually the qualitative methods are criticized for its subjectivity and biases. Could you please share with us what are the precautions taken by CQR to avoid the influence of subjective biases?
Okay. I mentioned earlier the elimination of researcher bias in doing CQR. Researcher bias is when you already bring into the data gathering procedure, the expectations of that you have about the topic on hand. Now, in CQR, researcher bias is kind of eliminated because the team of co-researchers are responsible for coming up with an analysis of the data, a consensus. That's why it's called consensual, because there is a common decision and interpretation of the data by a group of researchers. That is the beauty of consensual qualitative research. So that when the data is already, the interpretation of the data or the analysis of the data is done, and the auditor reviews it and approves by according to his or her judgment that the data is elegantly represented, then the researcher accepts what the data that emerge. So the role of the researcher here, so that the researcher shares her role with the co-researchers and the auditor. So the researcher's role here is to see the patterns based on the analysis done by the team and writes the results and makes sense of the data that emerge. Did I answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So I hope there are no more questions. So moving on. I call on Gayatri Prakash of second BSc Psychology to extend the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. Honorable Resource Person, Dr. Maribi M.A. Benita E. Balagan, and Head of her department, Dr. Father Jimmy Akkad, and Program Convener, Ms. Adira P.V., Assistant Professor of Department of Psychology. It is such an honor for me to get the opportunity to thank you all dignitaries. I would like to express my gratitude to all esteemed delegates of the webinar for the presence and contribution to make the webinar a great success. I extend my gratitude to our honorable resource person, Dr. Maribi ma'am, to take out time from her busy schedule to grace the event. Thank you for your inspiring and encouraging us with your words on the special day. We could know more about the CQR methodology. Thank you, ma'am. A special thanks to our management for providing immense support to make the webinars very successful. I extend my gratitude to Dr. Jimmy Akkad, HOD of Psychology, for organizing webinar even amid the pandemic. I may like to express our sincere thanks to Ms. Neeti Rose, Coordinator, Department of Psychology, for the warm words of welcome. I extend my gratitude to the other faculties of our department who really work hard to make this event successful. And also, I thank you to all my friends and research scholars present here for paying your attention and learning. I would like to end my speech here. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Today's session turned out fruitful for everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you and stay safe.
Just make memory now.
രഞ്ജിത്ത് സാറായിരിക്കും. ഓർമ്മ
Dr. opportunity to for your great magnanimity and generosity to spare time for us and to share with us your great wisdom. Thanks to you and to all.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thank you.